Hey everyone, Ivan here. So I want to start clearing up some misconceptions about a word and a concept that I really care deeply about. Sovereignty. Sovereignty. For obvious reasons, I have thought quite a lot about this concept, given that I founded Reclaim Your Inner Throne back in 2014, which is dedicated to pursuing sovereignty. And what I'm seeing in the world, in the way that people are making sense of this word, understanding or misunderstanding this word, it's concerning me. Is there no sound? I think there should be sound. I see that Joshua says there is no sound. Is there anyone else that can't hear me? No, all of these settings are. If anyone else is here and can hear me, please let me know. It's everything looks good on my end. So the concern that I have is the enormous level of misunderstanding around the concept of sovereignty, and it seems like this is an idea that we have no consensus reality around anymore. We don't seem to have a level of basic understanding even about what it is. So again, I just want to confirm, can you hear me? Thumbs up, let me know. Please let me know, Joshua. I don't want to be sat here speaking about sovereignty for 20 minutes without anyone being able to hear me. It's tragic, actually, because if we actually attacking the idea and the reality of sovereignty, we are implicitly, by consequence, promoting tyranny, because the two actually exist on a spectrum. They are like polarities, that you have qualities of sovereignty and you have qualities of tyranny. And if you have come to the point, which so many have these days, that you think sovereignty is somehow the problem in the world that is creating all kinds of COVID illness, the spread of COVID is caused by sovereignty. Some people seem to think this. They don't understand what it is. And when they're attacking it without understanding the underlying dynamics of sovereignty and tyranny, because they have not been studying it, or maybe because they lack the resources to understand it, they become proponents of tyranny. And this is law. This is like universal law. It's written into the source code of reality. And so this is why we need to clear it up. And I'm not meaning for this to become some kind of definitive take on what sovereignty is. Today, I want this to be a conversation, and that maybe a few takes further down the line, we can come to a place of having some clear definitions on it. But being that I've run Reclaiming a Throne for 7 years, you bet your ass I've thought about this. And the basic framework that I've been working within for this time, even though it's a very multidimensional, multifaceted framework, the map that I loved more than any of the others was the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover map, the map of masculine archetypes. And so obviously it's natural to see the king or the queen as the sovereign, right? So in this sense, it's an archetypal idea. And what I came to realize over years of studying this academically, but more importantly, studying it empirically, because I'm an empiricist. My epistemology isn't as a rationalist, even though people often think that, because I write as one. I was raised in a family of academics. I'm an empiricist. I work this stuff out with human beings, and I see what works. And when people have breakthroughs into whole new levels of function, I pay attention. Right? And I've seen this happen with a lot of people by now, which is that the four archetypes, they can be constellated in a particular kind of way that I call it the individuation matrix. I'm not going to go deeply into that today, but consider that we live in a world of polarity. That shouldn't be very hard to imagine these days, that we live in a world of polarity: man, woman, black, white, liberal, conservative, vaccinated, unvaccinated, so on and so forth. It's a polarity. So the nature of manifest reality is dualism, is polarity. And we struggle within the friction between polarities for as long as we live on planet Earth. And I actually think that polarity is the core curriculum of the human experience. Like, as we're born from the non-dual, the non-incarnated experience, into the incarnated experience of being on planet Earth, and maybe we came here to figure this shit out. Maybe that's actually the reason we're here. And we're failing in that, in doing that at a pretty epic level right now, but probably in order to actually succeed eventually. So you have then the polarity within this archetypal structure: king, warrior, magician, lover. And I found that to be the warrior lover polarity. This is a principle of, this I call it a bridge or an arc of polarity between these two archetypes. So you have a warrior. It's leaning this part of your psyche, this program that reaches you from the collective unconscious as imprints, a priori imprints that you're born with due to millennia of epigenetic programming and latent potentials, and maybe other things that we don't know about. Maybe there's a psychological, psychospiritual repository somewhere. Some people talk about the Akashic records. We don't exactly know where all of this comes from, but we can observe this. Carl Jung obviously came with this. So this warrior is the leaning into life. It's the proactivity. It's taking charge. It's just carrying your load. It's yang. It's leaning in. It's agency. It's the doing. The warrior is the doing. And the lover is the being, the reception, the enjoyment. You don't move so much. You are being led by a qualified warrior or by life. There is a receiving quality. And so this is a very correlated polarity to masculine and feminine. And so if you want to be sovereign, you need to bridge this polarity, the doing and being polarity, the penetrating and receiving polarity, the giving and receiving polarity. This is very strongly correlated as well to conservatism and liberalism or progressivism. And so in Reclaim Your Throne, we've always taught that the way to get to sovereignty is to bridge this. And you have to then go deep into an excavation process of all of the parts of you that you have not been willing to integrate. And so thus you become gradually whole. So sovereignty on some level must be about wholeness. It must be about integration. It must be about transcending or synthesizing polarity. If you think that sovereignty is about saying fuck off to everyone and doing exactly what you want, then you've really slept in class. Or you're willfully misinterpreting something that is so patently ridiculous, in such a patently ridiculous way, that you don't have the right to speak on this topic. Do your work, because you're contaminating the information ecology. It is clearly an inner principle that is reflected in your outside environment. That is sovereignty is. Which is to say, if you're defining sovereignty as some sort of externally dependent reality, some people have been throwing back at me the idea that, oh, but we sometimes have to limit sovereignty because people have done wrong things and so they go to prison. Then, no, you don't lose your sovereignty because your external reality changes. It's an internal principle. You got to get this. And what I also want to make very clear, I had a long and mentally taxing conversation today on this topic of the idea of win-win versus win-lose. In the way that I understand sovereignty, it is not possible to be sovereign and at the same time do win-lose thinking. It's not possible. Because win-lose carries a psychological field that is intrinsically toxic to sovereignty. So when you enter that frame externally, then that is mirrored into your inner world, and it starts literally undermining your sovereignty. The aftertaste of that is so disgusting to us on a soul level that our sovereignty starts collapsing, which is to say that sovereignty can only arise as a result of us speaking into our deepest truth at any given moment, that we are connected to our natural essence. And that natural essence is always in some way serving a Unitarian principle, that deep soul essence. I believe that. Maybe that's a choice that you have to make for yourself if you believe that or not. But at the very depth of our being, our God seed is still intact, and that God is the bridging of polarity, because it's the non-dual, the unified field. See? And so when you lose that, you are not sovereign, because you're not whole anymore. So this idea that people run around just spreading COVID-19 to people because they're championing sovereignty, and thus we need to attack sovereignty because people who are sovereign, they are some gangsters, complete like narcissistic individualists that don't give a shit about people. Well, think about that one. Think about how skewed from reality that actually is. It is so far into the cornfields that it's hard to comprehend. You're so far off of the path of truth that it's hard to comprehend for me, because I've been taking this for granted that people just comprehend what this is, but clearly it's entirely wrong. And so here we are in this situation where more and more people, because they have for some reason chosen not to be sovereign themselves, they are in some way, shape, or form so fragmented internally, serving so many different masters, having so many true or perspectives on reality that are mutually exclusive. They're like they don't work together. Because in an orderly psyche, there are certain ideas that you can't hold at the same time. Right? One idea being, for instance, that you have to have identification for being vaccinated. And if you don't have that, it's because you're cruel. And this is from an American frame. But you should not have identification when you go vote. And to request it is cruel. Those are two ideas that a human mind cannot hold at the same time without starting to break down. And so a lot of people have assimilated so many ideas internally that it started to break down their psyche. And so gradually we have to start idealizing a kind of slave morality, to speak in a Nietzschean way, yeah. And now it's bad to be strong. It's bad to be whole. It's bad to be a free agent in the world, a sovereign agent in the world, because that makes you cruel. Even though it's universal law that as long as you're cruel, you cannot be sovereign, because it crushes the internal experience of sovereignty to be cruel. Crushes it. Just wipes it right out. Sovereignty is to live my fucking dharma. It's to be a pure expression for the God-given seed that I was given here to plant on earth and to tend, so as to give shade and all kinds of fruit and nutrients to people. Right? And so the idea then that this sovereignty is somehow cruel is a cruel idea, because it undermines people's dignity, their power, their ability to stand on their own 2 feet in the world to such an extent that they have to start changing the fabric of reality in order to accommodate their internal views, right? And so now we are no longer sovereign, unfortunately. And because we're not sovereign and we don't have access to sovereignty, we have to start attacking sovereignty. And this is what happens. And I find this to be a tragedy. Okay, so let's. I see that it's it's a bit choppy, Wenche. I'm not sure if it's on my end or on your. I think I'm good. I'm not getting any warnings here. If not, I'm sorry. I'm going to start wrapping it up, actually. Or if you have any questions here towards the end, would love that. I know sometimes it can be a bit hard to get a word in when I start speaking, but I would love for you to contribute here towards the end. Because I don't think we have a language for this stuff that people get. I don't think we have a language for this stuff that people get. And so they completely misunderstand what it is. And that misunderstanding is being leveraged by people, by organizations, governments, corporations that benefit from citizens lacking in sovereignty. And so actually there seems to be a concerted campaign to undermine the very idea of sovereignty right now. This is why I'm speaking out against this conspirituality podcast. Maybe they have some points here and there, but they have such a distaste for sovereignty that they cannot be anything but agents of tyranny. This is law, universal law, written into the fabric of reality. And when people listen to people who promote tyranny, I have to speak out, because this is becoming common. These are not just ideas. Like in the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten just a couple of days ago, they had queried the young generation in Norway about democracy and about leaders. And the majority of the young generation in Norway, and I would imagine it's not so different other places, they would support the end or the displacement, the pausing of democracy in order to empower a leader that they felt represented their best interests. This is shocking. This is shocking that the majority of the hope of the future Norway, I'm Norwegian, actually now supports tyranny. No wonder we have little opposition to governmental overreach in the times of this pandemic. People like being ruled because they don't want the responsibility of sovereignty, and thus they have to undermine sovereignty, because seeing it for what it truly is so confronting that it would blow up my whole life, and so I must attack it as an agent of tyranny. This is what I see. I may be wrong in some cases, but as a general frame for how our culture is operating right now, at the 5 minutes to midnight mark, that's pretty accurate. That's pretty accurate. So I ask you now, do your work with regards to this. And maybe I can return later to bring even more clarity to what sovereignty is. But wholeness, integration, the bridging of polarities, living my dharma in service of a divine principle. So I'm essentially living my life as in a sort of supplicant, or like bowing, a bow to reality. My life becomes a bowing to reality. It's not like, I am the king, like people think it is. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's saying something about how leadership has been portrayed by our politicians and by movies. I think it's one good template for sovereignty in the movies is Aragorn. That's why I love him as a template. He is an accurate representation of what it means to be sovereign. This is why people love The Lord of the Rings, because they can feel the true blessing of sovereignty streaming through the narrative. This is why I have allowed myself to be deeply inspired by those blessing threads from Tolkien's Mind and Heart and Soul to my work with Reclaiming a Throne. This is why the men who do Reclaiming a Throne change so deeply, because they are introduced to an accurate representation of what sovereignty is, at least to the best of my ability. I'm sure there's way more to learn about this. That's why I care about it. And when we start pursuing sovereignty together, realizing that I can only rise if you rise. It's not like I rise so you get small. No, it's not like that. See, this is the story of separation, huh? Like Charles Eisenstein would call it. Sovereignty within the story of separation, or in the paradigm of the outer throne, as I would call it, is only one can rule. But when it is the inner throne we're talking about, everyone can rule. So we all have our unique gifts. And when you rise to even me making these videos, I say things that are a little bit outside of the, the allowed perspectives and words. I share maybe some intensity, some penetrating ideas. And do you feel like there's less room for you to do the same as I do that? Or do you feel actually that you have more permission to lean into the world and share your voice? I'd be very surprised if you didn't feel the second. Actually, I have some soul searching to do if you don't feel the second, which is to say, in order for me to rise, I need you to rise. And in order for you to rise, you need me to rise. Because we are interdependent creatures. This idea that there can be a king or a queen in isolation is absolutely mistaken. And that is the definition of sovereignty that is circulating now as the mainstream media and the government wants to undermine everyone who is engaging in wrongthink, who is doing things a little differently than they want us to do it. Okay? That's what I have to say about sovereignty today. I hope it was helpful. Tomorrow, we have the Seeds of Sanctuary 5-day activation event, and we are starting to have a great group for it now. And we're going to go deep into rewriting the timeline that we're entering into now, because I'm not alone in feeling that the dark tendrils of tyranny are sort of pulling at us from the future. And I'm a no to that, man. And so what we're doing is that we're rewriting it. We're going deep into an internal architecture for thriving, and we're rewriting the future, the timeline. We're shifting timelines, which is to say that we're engaging in some kind of magic that has, in our little way, I'm not saying it's all that is required, but it's in our way, it has the capacity to change the fabric of reality. Because, I'm deep down, I'm very strongly affiliated or connected to the magician archetype, and so I believe this. And in your reality, this will be true. It doesn't have to be in the reality, but you and I can only take responsibility for what is ours to do. So we'll be doing that over 5 days starting tomorrow, and we'll be having the beautiful opening ceremony, Seeds of Sanctuary, tomorrow at 6:30 Central European time, 12:30 noon Eastern time. And you can find more on that on inthrone.com/activation. I would love to have some of you there if you feel called to becoming a part of the change and to anchor in more principles of sovereignty so that you don't feel so fragmented and frazzled inside in the face of all of the bullshit that is percolating in the world right now. So welcome. I hope you're doing well. I'm now going to be preparing a bit for tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of my evening. Thank you for watching.